Hi guys, it's Blackie and Bear, and this is old Wayz number what, 9?
Yeah.
Number 9.
I think so.
Okay, we think. Alright, today will probably be a little bit shorter than usual, but what we're doing, we're going to answer some of your questions that you've given us recently. Now, one of the things that Bear had brought up earlier, and we hadn't got time to go into in depth, was some sourdough starters. So we're going to start with that. So take it away and tell us about what is sourdough starter.
Sourdough starter is just a yeast culture. Tim, if you think that's about ready.
Yeah, smells like sour buttermilk, a little bit fermented, yeah.
You start off with active yeast, some flour, some sugar, and some warm water. And you combine them together and the yeast will consume it and eat it and produce the starter. You have to feed your starter every 5 to 7 days with sugar and potato flakes. Mine is sugar, potato flakes, and warm water. We can add amounts later on. But you just mix it, stir it up every day, mix it up and just let it do its thing. And when you're ready, you pour what you want into a bowl and you add your flour and other ingredients, stir it up and make your bread in the traditional manner.
Now what it's going to do is it's going to cause your bread to rise. Back in the day before we had baking powder, baking soda, this was the method that was used. And so when you went to make biscuits, like you said, you'd bring your bowl out and you would dip a measured amount out of this into the bowl.
Which is usually around 1 cup.
About a cup, something like that. You would then add back into this the components to feed it, and then you would add your flour into this and make it up. Now, a lot of times, if you're going to be doing this a lot, like every morning making biscuits, you wouldn't just have one jar, you'd have several jars of this. I can remember a old lady that I knew many years ago that she had 8 jars, one for each day, so she could rotate it around and through it. Can you take a call or something? We can stop.
No, we're good.
Okay. What she'd do is that way she had, for Monday, she would dip out of this one, she'd refeed it, and she'd sit at the side making biscuits. And then she had a Tuesday, a Wednesday. Well, by the time she got back around to Monday, it had been fed and it's ready to go again. So she's constantly keeping a rotation. And so she made a big thing of biscuits. Biscuits was the primary bread that she had in the house. And so she'd make like a dozen biscuits in the morning. She'd eat like 1 or 2 for breakfast. She'd then have 1 or so with lunch, and then with dinner she'd have 1 or 2, and what was left she fed it to dogs. You know.
That's like my grandmother. My mother's mother, my mom is one of 7 children, and every morning my grandmother would make 2 dozen biscuits and put them in a bowl on the table before she went to work, because she was a school teacher. And at any given time, she was feeding as many as a dozen people at her table at any given meal. So, I mean, she knew industrial bread making was a science with her. And I often think about her when I'm cooking. She was a pretty amazing woman. But anyway, sourdough is labor intensive, but it's got a really good product.
It's something that you can make yourself to make leavened bread, make things swell up, because you can't always go to the store and buy baking soda or pre-made mixes or whatever.
No. A lot of these starter cultures, we mentioned it before, a lot of these starter cultures, they last forever. Absolutely, excuse me, forever. And there are literally starter colonies that are 200 years old. that are still active.
Where it will also take on sort of a unique flavor.
Yes, your sourdough in San Francisco is different from Seattle, is different from St. Louis, is different from Montgomery or wherever.
Because the natural yeast in the air, pollens, things like that, will find their way into this and will change the flavor slightly. And once you had someone that had got a really good culture, and they, because everybody was using this for making breads and stuff like that, but Mary's bread tastes better. Well, her culture was a little bit different.
Right.
It became highly prized, and that culture was kept going. As long as they kept feeding it, it would keep doing it, and the taste would stay similar. It may change over time, but it would stay similar. And I know in northern Alaska, a couple of years ago, they were talking about how they had found a trapper's cabin.
Right.
And they'd gone in, and in a can, they'd figured out this can had been his sourdough starter, and there were flakes still on the inside of the can. They had managed to reculture that and get that going again.
Right.
And so that was a 150-year-old sourdough starter culture that the guy grew back and started using again. So it's a way of making something that you can't get at the store that you can improvise at home to do the same job.
And it's fun. I mean, you involve your kids in it, they're learning how to do something that can help them out down the road.
Yeah.
And it's completely possible to make a starter culture as a child is being born. Feed it, use it, teach him or her how to use it. And then when they go out on their own, give them a little piece of the culture.
Yeah, pour some of it in a
Pour
jar,
some
give
in
it
a
to
jar
them.
and give it to them, and then they've got their own that you started for them. It's kind of like a legacy, if
Yeah.
you will. It's a legacy food. But if you can, everybody's got their recipe for doing it. Most of them, generally, they're all the same, but it's the little tweaking details. I was reading one book where the lady said you had to have immaculately clean everything. Mm-hmm. Just short of surgical operating room sterility. And then there was one that just said, just dump it in a bowl and mix it up.
Yeah.
I mean, it just depends on who's doing it.
Most of the ones that I've seen, like you've got right here, it'd be in a mason jar or something with something over the lid, usually not a solid lid. This is a ring with a piece of wax paper on it.
Yeah, I did that for just transporting it. Normally this sits, I went and bought a pack of red shop cloths and washed them. And I've got 2 of these jars sitting on my counter fermenting with the red cloth over the top held in place by the ring. And that cloth allows the yeast to go between the fibers and get in. It allows it to breathe. And my kitchen has a distinct smell in it right now because of those 2 jars of sourdough starter.
Mm-hmm. But suppose I come over to Bear's and eat some bread that he's made, and I really, really like it. I can take a jar and him give me a couple of spoonfuls of this. I then take it home, do the exact same process. That's my beginning starter. I put it in, I add the components to feed it on top of it, I give it a week to start growing, and then over the course of say 2 to 3 weeks, I'll have my version of his starter.
Right.
So that's how you can share recipes, and this becomes barter, guys.
Yes, it does.
Because like we were talking about earlier, to link back to that about barter, when nobody can get any baking soda or baking powder and you're wanting to make bread, because there ain't no bread at the store either. I can get flour, but I can't do anything with it. Or I can make, if you real heavy, intense labor, acorn flour. But it's all there is, and I want to be able to make bread of some kind. Then having something that will make it light and fluffy and not more like a cracker, more like bread, It's the air pockets in the bread is what makes that. Well, this makes the air pockets, and it's something that you can create.
He said something that struck a thought. You can take the inside of a cat head stalk and you can dry it and powder it and make flour. The taro, you can take it's an arrowhead shaped plant that grows in this area of the world. Some of them in other parts of the world are toxic, but it grows a little potato-like thing on the bottom of it. And you can take that and process it, dry it out and powder it. I think you have to wash it a couple of times, but it makes flour. Like you said, there's acorns. We both have made acorn bread.
Acorn bread is good. It's just labor intensive because acorns have tannins in them, and the white is not as bad. You just gotta leach it out over like a week.
Yeah.
The red acorns take longer, and
they
after that, once it stops being bitter, you can make flour out of it. Just grind it up and make flour, and you can make anything you can make out of flour you pick up at the store. You can make out of it. Again, it's labor intensive. You can see why Granddaddy and Grandpa worked so hard, because the average person was spending 14 hours a day back in the day trying to procure, process, plant, grow, whatever food. They didn't have time for a lot of shenanigans or what we do today like internet browsing and stuff, because they got up super early because you had daylight and they would do what they had to do.
Yeah, we up until around World War I, you didn't have a supermarket. Okay, you had general stores which sold staples. If you needed, there was a combination of supplies, food supplies, and hardware. If you needed that new invented barbed wire, you went to the general store and you got it. And then if you needed, a sack of flour, you went to the general store and got it. And you could barter for what you needed. But that having been said, grocery stores like we know them today, they didn't come in until after World War I and around the Great Depression.
Yeah, the first what we call grocery store chain was Piggly Wiggly, or was it
Winn-Dixie,
or IGA?
Yeah.
One of the two. Is it Piggly Wiggly or IGA? And what they did was they used their buying power, and it was after World War I, and this mobilization that had been done for the war effort. Well, they wanted to do that because you had these distribution idea of taking the wheat from Kansas or Oklahoma and taking it here and make flour and sending that to there, and this by train, by truck distribution network, IGA, Independent Grocers Association, gave them buying power to buy directly from the factories to get yeast, to get sugar, to get whatever, raisins, whatever, and be able to buy it cheaply enough. Give you an idea how food has come down in price. If you look at a lot of the old drawings and stuff like that of the 1700s, and you'll see a pineapple.
Yes.
Pineapples were so hugely expensive because they had to ship them all the way from the Philippines or something, and they didn't last that long, that the rich and powerful would buy them just to put them on a table, not to eat, but just to show that you had one.
It was a status symbol.
Status symbol. That's like I got a Maserati in the garage. I can afford such things. You see headboards of beds that had a pineapple carved into it.
Or gate posts.
Or gate posts.
Gate posts.
That was a symbol of being wealthy.
It was also a symbol of what's our word? Friendship, of being able to take care of people. If you needed something, hospitality.
Hospitality, influence, that
It
type
was,
of
it was a symbol of hospitality and friendship also.
And we think of, because we grew up with grocery stores.
Right.
That's a new concept. My grandparents knew before grocery stores, where it was like you saying a general store.
Yeah, my grandfather, my great grandfather, ran a general store out in the county for years and years and years and years, probably 25 years before he moved into town.
And if things go back to such days, and we're seeing a lot of that where there's just shortages, what if there isn't any wheat to make bread? You know, you just assume that when you go to the grocery store they're going to make bread. Well, you assume there'd be toilet paper, right?
Right.
And yet there wasn't any. You'd assume you could pick up a Twinkie, but it ain't. You know, everything on that shelf is subject to supply and demand. And we were coming up and we would hear stories about the Soviet Union and how they'd have to stand in line hours for one loaf of bread. You were allowed one loaf. And problems like that in China and India and all this stuff. And, you know, we were so removed from that because that's over yonder. That doesn't happen here. And yet, in just the last couple of years, we've seen shortages on staples. Now, it's baby formula. You know, who would have, the one thing you think you should have no matter what would be baby food, baby diapers, be able to take care of the little ones, but we don't have it. You know, the supply chains are so stretched right now that it is very easy for this stuff to get interrupted or not stopped.
Yeah, we have mentioned it before, but if you are short on baby formula, there's a little can called pet milk, evaporated milk. And you can take that can of milk and, because this is what, when our folks were out, when our parents were out of formula or, you know, baby food, they would improvise a small can of pet milk, a little bit of clear Karo syrup, and warm water, and just mix it up. And it will provide a sustainable, nutritious source of food for a child.
That'll get you through until you can get something else.
Yes, and if you want to get a little body to it, put in some potato flakes. If you have potato flakes, just a very, 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 very small amount.
You're going to have to go back and look. But if you look back in the 1920s,
yeah,
there were a lot of magazines and publications for the ladies back then. And those type of things of how to make baby formula like he's talking about. How to take goat milk and run it through a process so you could feed it directly. There's all kinds of things, but that is a century ago now.
right.
But you've got the great advantage. You got internet.
And the Library of Congress is online, but they've got a copy of all of this.
All of it. You go back and look at Library of Congress, start looking at those women's magazines from the Great Depression. It's going to show you how to sew. It's going to show you how to make meals out of nothing. There's going to be tons of recipes because the women in those days, you know, you got married, you're off on a farm in the middle of nowhere. You had to be able to make your own stuff. And so these things were the internet of the day. It was new ideas. It was sharing ideas from women out in the woods, out in the field that actually worked, and they were sending it in for people like you to learn. So it's a huge resource, and I recommend you look at that if you're in that type of thing. It's not a bad thing to look at to begin with because you never know what you're going to find in there. I remember reading an article in Backwoods Magazine, another great source, on how to take a 6-volt car battery and make a welder out of it.
Really?
A pair of jumper cables and the welding rod, and you can sit there and it tells you what welding rod to go to the welding shop and get, and you can hook to a car battery and use it as a welder. And I've tried it. It works.
That's a cool idea.
I had a pair of goggles and I had a boat hitch that was cracked, and we were in the middle of something where we couldn't get out of here without it. And so I went to town and I was talking to the guy at the welding shop, and I told him that, and he said, "Oh, you want to," and he quoted whatever the number was on this. and gave me 2 rods. I paid like $1 a piece for the rods. And so just take your jumper cables, put the hot to the rod, put the ground to the trailer, hook to the battery, and you're arcing. Just sit there and hold it, and you're tacking like that. You
Gotcha.
yeah, and so it'll melt. Yeah, hold it for just a second and break it loose. Hold it just a second and break it loose. And I went, okay, I did it. Now I'm sure it wasn't any good on a battery, but it got me home. But the point is, that old technology, I think that'd been from like 1929, in one of those home mechanics books or whatever, and it was talking about how to use a car battery and a pair of jumper cables to weld, in case you got broke.
Let me throw a word out here. Victory Garden.
Yeah.
A victory garden, as I understand it, the concept of a victory garden actually started with World War I, and they were the women who were the primary homemakers of that era. So nobody get offended, okay? They were the primary homemakers of that era, and while the men were out working in the defense factories or growing food on the farm for the war effort or going overseas, the woman, the homemaker, would grow a garden in her backyard to feed her family. And it works. Contrary to popular opinion, they work. Now they're overshadowed by their World War II counterparts, but you know, there were victory gardens all over the country during World War I and World War II. And for those of you old enough to remember, they made a reappearance during Desert Storm. Desert Storm 1 and 2. They made a reappearance, and you heard people talking about growing victory gardens.
It wouldn't be a bad idea today, like we've talked about in earlier videos, of being able to supplement like fresh vegetables, like whatever. Look around your local area and find out if somebody grows wheat.
Yep.
You know, can I get some wheat? Is there a place that's still near you? And there are places. Or today they have processors that you can put on a table that will process and make your own wheat into flour.
Right.
So look
Lehman's
around, it's possible.
Lehman's sells a couple of hand-turned grinders. They're not high production, but they do work, and they will work for your family. When you're transitioning your family from from store-bought flour to this home ground flour, mix it. Okay, if you go straight to whole wheat flour, it's going to cause some unpleasant side effects. Okay, particularly with gas and other related
Because you're not
things.
used to that yet.
Yeah, you're just not used to it. And your body has to remember how to process whole wheat. So just, you know, cut you in half and half, and then less processed flour until you have transitioned over to straight whole wheat flour.
I had a co-worker that he got onto the healthy food craze.
Yeah.
And he started eating whole wheat this and whole wheat that, and it wasn't probably about a week, and he was having severe gas problems that he was not used to, and I pointed that out to him and said, your gut's not used to processing it, you're going too fast. That's true of anything, and I've warned people many times that getting into camping and stuff like that, to always try out these foods at home before you go out, because I've been on camp outs where somebody's bringing out, they don't eat MREs, they haven't been eating MREs, but they brought an MRE for this weekend to eat. And they spend half of the night in the woods because their tummy couldn't take it. I always try new foods at home just in case.
Nothing ruins a camping trip like an unhappy tummy.
Woo! Montezuma's Revenge will get them.
It's
really
not
does.
pleasant. We won't go into the gory details,
Right.
but it is not pleasant.
Okay, my next thing I want to bring up right quick, and this is not an advertisement, but I just want to point this out. Something that I picked up was, I went and got me one of the Chinese stitcher devices. Okay? Make sure you can see it. This is a hand crank sewing machine. I bought it off of Amazon, and the total price, shipping and everything, is like $120, $125. Okay? It will sew thick leather. It will sew thin stuff.
It will sew paper towel.
Well, I just did a demonstration to Bear because I was bringing it to show it to Bear, and I sewed 2 paper towels together with it.
They're right over there.
Oh. You know, sewed paper towels. But the thing about it is this doesn't require any power. It's all hand powered. And look online, there's tons of videos on this thing, but I've been impressed with it because from a off-grid mindset, this would allow me to repair my gear. This would allow me to modify and make gear because it will sew heavy leather. I can make leather sheaths out of it if I have the leather. It can sew clothing. It's slow, but you're going at your pace. And if you're not a big sewer, this is the thing to start with because it's super simple. Turn the crank, feed the stuff in. You know, I made my prototype for my bag on this in about 2.5 hours. So for those guys that are talking off-grid, I would recommend looking at one of these down the line for you to have something off-grid. It doesn't require any power. All you need is thread, the parts on it. Yes, the American machines are 10 times better. Yes, they do all a better job, etc. Yeah, they cost $300, $400, $500 and usually run off of electricity. And my wife has a $400 sewing machine that I bought her several years ago so that she could do crafts with it. I think we've had to take it into the Singer place a dozen times because she says it won't sew right or it's whatever or etc. I've got an $18.99 Singer treadle machine at the house. It's foot powered. That's mine, that I bought when I was 9 years old. I bartered for that thing, and I can sew leather, I can sew canvas, I can sew whatever.
How many times has it been into the Singer shop?
Never in my lifetime. You know, I learned to sew on that, and I can repair clothing, I can make clothing. When I was doing Living History, we were making our own costumes. In fact, when my wife and I got married at the Living History event, I made her wedding dress, which was 11 yards of fabric in that dress, and it was a 1750s ball gown that I found a pattern, and I made that, and that was her wedding dress for that historic event. Man, it was huge, but I made it on that Singer treadle machine. I could sew it. And 9 times out of 10, she'll come in there when she's doing some project and say, "Can you set up the treadle machine? Mine won't sew this." Old treadle will sew it. Well, this is portable. The problem with my treadle is it's a big, you know, case. This is portable. And so I can just pick it up and go anywhere, and with a C-clamp, anchor it to any table or whatever, and I've got a position I can sew, repair, whatever. And so for an off-grid type thing, you might want to look at something like this, you know. We've also mentioned in the past the Lehman catalog, because they deal so heavily with the Amish. It'd be worth it just to get one of those catalogs and go down through the list and see. And it's not just something like, you know, this type deal. It's all, the Lehman catalog has water pumps.
It's got everything in it that you want. Go to lehmans.com.
And they've got everything. I mean, you need a grinder to make wheat. They got it. You want a hand-powered crank thing that'll cut up meat, a sausage maker, a whatever.
Anything that you can think of that could be utilized without electricity, they've probably got it.
Mm-hmm. The thing that we were thinking about doing an off-grid several years ago, me and my wife, and there was a place that we were looking at, and there's a very good running creek about 200 yards from where we would want to put up the site. And I was thinking about some way of getting the water up there. Well, Lehman has these inertia pumps.
Yes.
That don't require electricity. They just shoot, thump, shoot, thump. They're using physics and pressure. And so it's spurting like a coffee cup of water at a time. Well, if you run that into a 200-gallon tank, and it takes it 3, 4, 5 days to fill up, don't think it'll do it in that length. Let your sink drip and see how long it takes your water bill to go way up. Leave a toilet running, see how quick. Water is just constantly running, even in a small degree. It's filling up a bucket. And a good friend of mine, they had a rainwater, because down here in my south we got it. They took the rainwater from their gutters and went into a series of 55-gallon drums.
Right.
And they never had to haul water down there. You know, that water comes into the first drum, and then it has to go through a layer of sand into the second, third, and fourth drum, and that filtered it. And then he'd change out the sand in the drums every 2 or 3 years. And then when the water comes out, it ran through like a Brita water pitcher filter,
Right.
and then to a tap. So he could turn the tap on at his sink, and he had right at 300 gallons of water sitting there, ready to go. Yeah, it hadn't rained today. Trust me, you get a roof eave running, and you get a 10-minute shower, it'll fill it up. You know, you'd be amazed how much water you capture that quickly. I've read stories of soldiers in the field where they took tarps and laid them out, and rain was coming in, and they just picked up the edge of the tarp where the water run to the middle of it and make like a pond, and then as it's raining, guys are out there filling up canteens and stuff because it was fresh, clean water. There's always a way to do it if you sit and think about it a little bit, you know.
Right, we've said that this type of stuff is not hard, but it does take a little constructive engineering from time to time, a little bit of thought. It's like this. Most folks might see this as chunk-like tuna. Well, yes, it is chunk-like tuna in oil, but it's also a lamp.
Mm-hmm.
You can take this chunk-like tuna in oil, put a little hole here in the top, improvise a wick, stick it in the hole, and let it get saturated with the oil, and then light it. That's all there is to it. Now it will...
And it doesn't harm the food doing that.
No, it just draws the oil off of it. But it does have a little bit of a smell to it, but you'll be able to see in the dark.
I've seen the video where the guy cuts the top off, and then he lays a napkin across the top of it. He lets it saturate, and he sets the napkin on fire.
Yeah.
And he's got like a canteen cup on top of it with water. It brings the water to a boil. He boils the rice. When the rice is done, he takes the spoon, he takes the burning paper towel off the top of the meat. It ain't hurt the meat at all because it just rolled off. And then he puts the warm tuna with the hot rice, and has tuna and rice, using the oil to heat the whole meal. So it's just how creative you want to be, is the bottom line. Okay, the last thing that I want to bring up right quick, because I know Bear's got someplace to be. In the earlier video, I spoke about this book, and I did not have a copy of it. I have since got rid of that copy, so I got me another one. Okay? And the name of the book is How to Build Your Dream Cabin in the Woods by J. Wayne Fears. And there is the barcode and the ISBN numbers right there. Now, why I recommend this book. It's not as much like floor plans and stuff like that on building the cabin as it is a really good book on where to build the cabin. And
Location,
why.
location, location.
Location, location, location. He goes into, he gives you the information of how to find land. Places that you can go to and find land, like the tax assessor's office where someone has passed away. This parcel of land down here that hadn't had the taxes paid on it in 3 years. Nobody knows that land hasn't had the tax paid on it, and you can pay the taxes and take over that land. That happens commonly.
All the time.
All the time in rural areas. Where to locate it, how to put it, how to make sure it's got a water table, how to get to your county co-op and find out the flood plan. This tells you how often this area floods, if it is ever flooded in the last 100 years, and what and why. Thermal conditions of building the house here is hot and muggy in the summer, but if it was built 300 yards north up the hill, you have a breeze current and it's cooler there in the summer. Things like that. He goes in depth into that. And then there are some cabin designs and plans and stuff like that. Can you use an outhouse? What other kind of sanitation? And the big one, security. Now, I don't hear a lot of this in a lot of the off-grid talks, but from experience, from good friends of mine, let me share this with you. Let's pretend that I'm just somebody that grew up in this neck of the woods. I run down this county road every few days. And I happen to notice that there's a new dirt road starting. Kind of hard to miss. They bring in a pipe, they put it in, and then they bring in dump truck loads of dirt to give you that access to get to your land that you just bought. Well, somebody's moving into that area. Then you're going to go pay somebody to cut trees, or you're going to let some lumber company, that's a separate issue, come in and cut some trees off your land to make a clearing for you to build your dream cabin. I'm going to notice that. And then you're going to come in with you and your friends and your family and everything, and you're going to come out and you're going to set up a building out here to have that retreat to go to. And at first it's going to be some small little building, and you're going to put stored camping gear, stored food stuff, someplace you can retreat out of the city if life goes bad and you can come out here. Here's a rule for you. Big padlock, big prize. You're not here. You don't live here. I live 10 miles down this road. I notice all this activity, and I see you bring in that nice building and put it up, or build a building and put it up, and you're going back to the city for the week. Well, I'm just going to drop by in the middle of the night and check this out. There's nobody out here.
Right.
Where I'm coming from is my good friend who built a cabin down by the creek. And it was 25 miles from where he lived. There was nobody that lived down there. That's one of the reasons he picked it, because it was right against all this big timberland. And so there was nobody, he had no neighbors for 3 to 4 miles. And so he thought this would be a great place. And they came in, they built this cabin, they got the cabin set up, and it wasn't 2 months before they came out there. Somebody had broke the door in, they had ransacked the cabin, took anything of value, and left. Another friend of mine, they came in with one of the portable buildings, one of them wood portable buildings, hauled them in to have it where you had a little front porch and everything, gonna make a little cabin.
Yeah.
They dropped it off on Saturday. They got it all looked at. There was nothing in it, you know. And he said that the idea was they'd just haul cots and stuff with them. That way there's nothing to steal, right? It's just a building sitting there. He left on Sunday afternoon. The next Friday night he came out, and when he opened the door, somebody had taken all the 3/4 inch plywood up out of the floor, took a sawzall or a chainsaw, and took the 12-foot 2x8s and cut them out of the floor, took the wall joists out, and it was a hollow shell sitting there, and obviously they were coming back because they left a little pile. They probably filled up a pickup truck so they couldn't get any more in it. So now they've got a hollow shell that wouldn't hold it. Security and being out in these areas is a big, big deal. If you've got land out like that and it's not on Granddaddy's farm, where everybody knows Granddaddy's there and he knows every tree and twig, if you're an outsider out in the middle of nowhere, learn how to cache things. Bury it and hide it. Because if you set up some sort of permanent site and then leave it, big padlock, big payday. There's nobody out here. Plus the fact that many of you live in cities, and you're used to, whenever you pick up the phone and you dial 911, you've got a fire truck coming, you got an ambulance coming, or you've got law enforcement coming. Being out in the counties it may be a couple of hours before law enforcement show up, just depending on where you're at and what's going on.
Or how many deputies are on duty.
At 2 o'clock in the morning, they may not have any deputies on duty and they got to wake somebody up. You know, same thing with the fire truck. Your nearest fire may be 45 minutes away to get to you, or 30 minutes.
Let's say a 60-mile radius of where we're at right now, there are only, I think, 3 paid fire departments. Most of the others are, well, all of the others are rural volunteer departments.
Where they've got to send out a call, and that guy's on a tractor somewhere.
Yep.
The fire chief is working at a general store down here, and whatever. They all got to run to the firehouse, grab the machine,
Grab the gear and go to you.
and go to you. Most times they get there, it's done burned down. They're just trying to control make sure your woods don't go. And if you got a woods fire, same thing. If you're gonna think seriously about becoming off-grid and independent, you're gonna have to understand you are alone. You have to provide your own police force, your own fire department, your own medical until somebody can get to you. You gotta buy time.
Yeah, you are your own first responder. And that's just not here, okay? That not just in South Alabama. That's in, Montana,
Yeah.
Wyoming, New Mexico, Arizona, West Texas, Colorado.
I remember
You are your own first responder, and you need to know these things just for your own sake.
it's something you need to be aware of before you step off in there, because it's the thing you don't think of that always bites you in the butt. I remember one of those cop shows years ago where it would reenact something that happened to a law enforcement officer. And he was out, I believe it was Wyoming, and officer made a stop like 1 o'clock in the morning. Driver driving real erratic. He thought he might be falling asleep at the wheel, or drunk or something. When he walked up to the window, the guy shot him. And so the guy then took off. The officer managed to get back to his squad car. He managed to call and say, "I've been shot," and give his location. When the dispatcher called the other officer, and the camera shifts over to the other officer, he said, "I was John's immediate response backup. I'm 135 miles away." He's running 160 trying to get to you, but he's 135 miles away. When you start getting out in these specially desirable areas where I am way out there, you need to think about that. How did people do it in the past? I can tell you how some of my family members did. Security around the homestead, big pack of dogs. They were not pets. Someone would show up every day to dump food out for them. A friend, a family member, the guy that lives down the road, whatever, they pay him to come dump out food. Them dogs are not your friend. They will gnaw your arm off, But nobody wanted to come up there because of them dogs.
Right.
And so you drove up on a car, you had 10 dogs around that car barking their head off. It was a security system that, like my granddaddy had dogs for that. And these were not pets. We had one time when a deputy sheriff pulled up, wanted to talk to my granddaddy, and when he went to get out of the car, 2 big dogs came running out of the barn. He shot both of them. My granddaddy was in the kitchen. He heard me, stepped out on the back porch at the screen door and looked at him. And the deputy said, "I have the right they were being aggressive, and I have the right to shoot them." And granddaddy said, "I hope you got more bullets," and did like that. And there were 10 more dogs coming at a dead run. Deputy sheriff got back in the car. Hope you got more bullets. Because he would go around, he told the vets, said, "If you got one that somebody's bringing in to put it down, it's a fairly young dog, call me, I'll come take it. Call the shelter, got a big dog, I'll take it." Until he got him a pack. And that was his security around his place, because you wasn't going down there, and like I said, these ain't his buddies. So if a bad ne'er-do-well shot a dog, they don't want to have to shoot one because it makes too much noise, it might attract attention. but it was keeping people away from his barn, his equipment, etc., because he had a pack of dogs. Do I think that that is humane? No. Not in today's, way of looking at things. But during the Great Depression, whenever someone would steal the gold out of your teeth if they got the chance because their kids were hungry and starving too, yeah, you'd be amazed what you got to do to survive. Well, anything else, brother?
I think we're good right now.
Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed it. Please leave any questions or comments down there, and if there's something else you want us to deal with, we will be glad to do it. And we'll get back with number 10. We'll come up with something for that.
Leave us a comment. Leave us a suggestion.
Yep, what do you want to hear, guys? All right, until next time, guys, I'm Blackie and Bear. Wishing you safe journeys. Have a great day, guys.